This is Josh Friedman in Skopje, Macedonia, where behind me there is a new government in place. Following 6 months without a government, Macedonia has a new government and a new prime minister, and I believe a couple new flags up. I don't recall previously seeing a European Union flag or EU flags here outside the government building in Skopje, but they certainly are here now, although the wind has died down and you don't see all the stars of the EU flag at the moment. But maybe you will shortly. The wind's picking up a little bit. Anyhow, the new prime minister is former opposition leader Zoran Zaev. Zaev has said that it is his priority to lead Macedonia into both the European Union and NATO. To do so, he's going to have to overcome a very thorny issue, which the Macedonian government is addressing today. Just today, the Macedonian and Greek foreign ministers are engaged in talks, I believe, down in Athens, where they are discussing the name dispute. Ever since Macedonia's independence, there's been a dispute between Greece and, well, Macedonia over the name of Macedonia. Athens objects to the name Macedonia, saying that it's a territorial claim on the northern Greek region of Macedonia, and for that reason Greece has vetoed Macedonia's membership in the NATO military alliance, but now they are trying to sort that out, and perchance this country will be entering NATO sometime in the near future under the name Former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, or FYROM, as this country is referred to both in the United Nations and in diplomatic circles. Anyway, how did we get here? So over the past couple years, Macedonia has been involved in a political crisis. A couple years ago, major protests kicked off right here outside the government building in Skopje. Those protests against former Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski and his ruling Monero party lasted and grew on and off for about a year and a half until Gruevski was forced to resign under an EU brokered deal, and then last December there were early parliamentary elections held here in Macedonia. Gruevski actually narrowly won, and Monero narrowly won, or came in first place in those elections, but Gruevski failed to form a coalition. Zaev, on the other hand, succeeded. He struck a coalition deal with the ethnic Albanian parties, which you need to do in order to form a government here in Macedonia. In order to do so, Zaev reportedly struck a deal in Tirana, Albania, on making Albanian an official language nationwide in Macedonia. It already is an official language in the areas of Macedonia in which more than 20% of the population is Albanian, but the ethnic Albanian parties here have been demanding that the Albanian language be made an official language nationwide. Well, that agreement, which may or may not have happened, triggered daily protests for several weeks here in Skopje. I covered those protests about a few months ago. Those protests were Monero supporters and nationalists who were protesting against Zaev and against the ethnic Albanian parties and their supposed coalition deal on making Albanian an official language nationwide. Well, come now, with Zaev and his coalition in place and the new government here and operating behind me, they are either saying that that deal never happened, or Zaev at the least has backtracked on that deal, and it really remains unclear what's going to happen on that issue. And momentarily we will be heading to the predominantly Albanian region or part of the country to discuss that further. But first I'll note that as far as the Greek issue goes, Zaev coming in is a major change of pace. It was the Gruevski governments that built the Skopje 2014 project, which you can see a slight bit of it right here, and I'll show you more footage. The Skopje 2014 project consists of the neoclassical buildings and statues that are all over the heart of the capital here. Well, that, as I've noted before, was clearly a message to Greece that Macedonia or Skopje was not going to take orders from Athens. The project was basically a historical claim to the Macedonian region and arguably a whole lot more. But now, with the new government in place and with the tides turning, what might be overlooked is the internal ethnic issue here in Macedonia that is very much an unresolved conflict, and in the long run it might very well be a much bigger deal than the name dispute with Greece. So now we are going to head to the predominantly Albanian part of the country, and I'm going to cut to that report right now. Here we are in northwest Macedonia in the city of Tetova, where there's an Albanian flag flying above the city center, and where locals are preparing for nightly Ramadan festivities. Yes, we are still in Macedonia, but there's a dramatically different feel here than in the capital, or for that matter, in much of the country. Here in Tetova, there's a majority Albanian population, and when you're walking around town, most people in the streets are speaking Albanian. You see here that there's a very, very strong Muslim community. A lot of women walking around in hijabs. There are people coming and going from the mosques, especially at this time of year, since it's Ramadan. Now, what better of an opportunity to delve into the ethnic conflict that remains in Macedonia. These hills that you are looking at, as well as, for that matter, the city center and much of the city. If we go back to 2001, it was a war zone. Up in the hills, Albanian guerrilla fighters belonging to the National Liberation Army, the NLA, they were stationed up in these hills that surround one side of the city, right here by the city center in Tetova, and they were firing down on Macedonian police and soldiers who were stationed in the city. That was during the 2001 insurgency in Macedonia that took place following the Yugoslav wars. It lasted for, I believe, 8 or 9 months, something like that, and it wasn't nearly as deadly as the Yugoslav wars. The casualties were only in the hundreds, and it ended with the Ohrid ceasefire and peace agreement that has basically remained in place ever since then, and there's only been very sporadic clashes between ethnic Albanian militants and Macedonian authorities since then. The latest or most notable recent one being what happened in Kumanovo, which I visited back in 2015, a couple years ago. Well, anyhow, despite the new government being in place here, and despite these daily protests in Skopje and elsewhere in the city over the Albanian language issue, despite them being over, the ethnic issues remain in Macedonia. If the residents of Tetova were given the opportunity to vote in a referendum on leaving Macedonia and joining Albania, they just might do so. There are strong sentiments favoring that in this city, even though it's definitely not in the works at the moment, and it might not ever be, but it remains a huge concern for Macedonian nationalists who view the issue of making the Albanian language an official language nationwide as a stepping stone toward federalization of the country, meaning that the ethnic Albanian areas would get autonomy, and then following that, the progression in the minds of Macedonian nationalists is that after the language becomes official nationwide and after there's autonomy, then the country would break up and the ethnic Albanians here in the northwest would unite with Albania, or maybe a greater Albania that would include Kosovo and other areas. Well, that might just remain a fantasy for years or possibly forever, but the people who live here still very much want the Albanian language to be recognized as official language nationwide, and they also have other gripes and other issues that they're not going to be putting aside anytime soon, especially if their own ethnic Albanian parties that are in the government don't do anything about it. So another issue, for instance, is the distribution of taxpayer funds. A lot of Albanians allege that the national government in Skopje gives disproportionate amounts of taxpayer funds to the municipalities that are dominated by Macedonians, and give far too little money to the municipalities that are dominated by ethnic Albanians. That's a gripe, along with the language issue, that's probably not going to go away anytime soon, and it remains to be seen whether there will be any momentum or even any appetite in the new government for handing over more rights to ethnic Albanians. As you can see with the recent street protests, that the VMRO party and the nationalists can mobilize forces, and that certainly would pose a threat to Zaev and his government if he were to start handing over more rights to Albanians or conceding on the language issue. So these are things that are very much unresolved, and it's a mystery how they're going to play out in the years to come. And this country, as it attempts to join the EU and NATO, and as it works out its issue with Greece over the name problem, it still very much has an internal conflict that is an existential threat to the country. So with that perspective, I'll just give you a little bit more of a glimpse at Tetova. I'll crop in some photos of the Ottoman church and some other interesting things from around town. When you walk around here, you're sitting in a cafe like I am right now, or a restaurant, at times you can forget that you're in Macedonia. There are Albanian flags, everyone's speaking Albanian. I mean, we're right by Kosovo, close to Albania as well. I mean, you could sometimes easily forget that you're actually in Macedonia here. There is a Macedonian flag flying outside the municipality or the city hall building, but peculiarly it's flying right beside an Albanian flag. I don't know if that is a sign of hope for the future, that the two ethnicities in this country will cooperate, but maybe you could take it as one. One thing I forgot to note is that it's really unclear what the actual demographics are in Macedonia, since there hasn't been a proper census since, I believe, the early 2000s, and that one said that around 25% of the country is Macedonian, or excuse me, is Albania, but the Albanians are having children at a much faster rate than the Macedonians, and over time the demographics of the country could really swing, and that could throw yet another wrench in this complicated inter-ethnic framework that is the modern country of Macedonia, and we'll use the name Macedonia for now. Alright, that is a wrap from Northwest Macedonia in the predominantly ethnic Albanian neighborhood. If you enjoyed getting a glimpse of this, as well as the rest of the video, please leave a like on YouTube and share the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, благодарам, фаламандери, and ciao.